Shopify Masters is powered by Shopify, the easiest way to sell online, in person, and anywhere in between. To get an extended 30-day trial, visit shopify.com/masters.
When we first launched the second campaign, I mean, I think we made like $60,000 in a day and a half. Like it was immediately the people who were there the first time who were excited, they immediately jumped back in.
Hey, my name is Felix, and I'm the host of Shopify Masters. Each week, we learn the keys to success from e-commerce experts and entrepreneurs like you. In this episode, you'll learn what happens when you don't reach your Kickstarter funding goal, how to relaunch a Kickstarter campaign after an unsuccessful campaign, and the difference between working with reviewers versus bloggers. Today, I'm joined by Jenn and Brett Epstein from Sideclick. Streamline your streaming experience with Sideclick, a universal remote attachment for your streaming device, and was started in 2015 and based out of Jupiter, Florida. Welcome, Jenn and Brett.
Thanks, Felix. We're really excited to be on with you today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
For sure. Okay, so tell us a bit more about this product, the Sideclick remote that you guys sell.
Sure. Well, our sort of idea for this product started very just organically because we as a family were looking to sort of save some costs. And one of the ways that we did that was by becoming what's we know now as a term called cord cutting. So we cut ties with our cable company. And we started off with our cord cutting journey and we got ourselves a Roku. And I wasn't, familiar at all with streaming devices, and I don't think Brett had much familiarity with it. But he sort of did some research and got us a Roku, and we were sort of off on our streaming way. And he sort of came up with this idea just from our own use of our own Roku. We found that we really loved it, and it had this handy dandy little slick remote. But we were always having to kind of search for the other remote to turn on and off the TV, or to search for another remote to, control the volume. And I think Brett had an idea that if he had a slim remote that could literally click to the side and attach somehow to the remote, it would be a solution that, he himself wanted. And, at first I was kind of like, I don't know, sure, honey, it's a good idea. And then the more I started using the Roku and found that, I would turn it on and the volume would be blasting and I'd have to find the other remote, or our girls would be having problems, juggling the multiple remotes, I kind of got on board. I was like, I think this actually is a really good idea.
For those of you who aren't interested or aren't familiar with the streaming remotes, almost all of them, like the big players, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, Apple TV, they all have really small remotes to control the streaming devices, but they're usually Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and none of them control like the basic TV function. So you can't turn on the TV, you can't control the volume, the input. A lot of cord cutters use like a antenna to get their local HD channels. You only have a couple channels, so you just needed channel up and down. So it was really just the lack of those basic buttons, and I found myself having to surf with two remotes, one in each hand.
This is really a great idea, because I don't have too much experience with a lot of these devices, but the ones that I have used, you're right. It's funny that they make it so difficult to turn on and off the TV, which is like the very first step you have to take before you can use the actual device. So when you were coming with this idea, do either of you have experience in developing products like this? Because this looks like a very slick product.
Yeah, I have a mechanical engineering background. So my day job, actually now I work on designing jet engines, but I used to do some product development, like consumer product development. I wasn't really into it, and for the most part, most of my jobs ended with us delivering like a prototype to a customer. But I've always been kind of an aspiring inventor and kept a journal. And my journal I never really did much with. I think Kickstarter kind of changed that because it made that process more accessible to inventors who maybe don't have the funding to start a product from scratch. But this one wasn't in my journal. This was basically one that I came up with the idea. Like Jen said, she kind of got it, but I have a 3D printer, a really basic small 3D printer, and I printed just a shell of what I thought would work. And it had no buttons, no anything. I just kind of clipped it on and showed it to Jen, and she's like, "Yeah." She's like, "I get it."
Yeah, and
this could
I
work.
actually, and I have sort of a more of a generalized business background, and have spent some time just kind of in business, the administration side of business, a little bit of marketing, and I think what really got me excited about it was the fact that I did some research on the demand and sales of the streaming devices themselves. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they were just exploding, like millions and millions of units were being sold for Roku and Apple TV and Amazon Fire TV. So the fact that we were a complementary product for something that was just exploding in the marketplace was really exciting to me, because I felt like, you're already so ahead of the game. Marketing is such a challenge to introduce a product to someone, but it's kind of like basic economics. When it's a complementary product to something that's already just, launching into space, it was very exciting to me, because I felt like it was a product that was a solution, which is the best kind, but it's also attached to something that's already just has so much momentum in the market. So that was kind of exciting for me.
Yeah, this is a very important topic that I hear a lot from entrepreneurs that are successful, which is about timing, about catching that wave like you're talking about and riding it as it's rising. You want to be able to be a part of something that's already becoming popular. You don't want to be the ones that are creating the market. You want to be part of a market that's already growing. So when you were doing this kind of research to understand or to and then realize that there was a growing demand in this industry, did you use any particular like tools or services or websites that were helpful in determining all of this?
Yeah, a lot of it is really just kind of Googling demand and seeing, Googling terms like what are the sales statistics of the streaming devices. And you can find a lot of specific niche reports from professional marketing companies. I think one is called like Parks. And, they have an entire just study that shows how the streaming market is selling, and they, rank the streaming devices sales and they show you a trajectory of which devices are going to be taking over market share. So there is so much just free information out there, and it's from very credible marketing firms, and they kind of give you a taste of the report, which gives you, in our case, pretty much all the information we needed. And then if you need, the details and the nitty gritty of the report, you can, pay for them. In some instances, they're very expensive, but we found that we were able to get pretty much all the information that we needed just from, basic Google searches on how products were selling. In some cases, companies, it's just public knowledge and public records. They're letting you know how much they're selling. Like Amazon, for instance, is a little bit more secretive as to how many devices exactly they were selling. But, Brett and I, another way that we would research it, which was kind of exciting, is that we would walk into like Best Buy, for instance, and we would look at the streaming shelves. And I mean, there were literally barrels of streaming devices. Not only were they on the shelves, but literally there would be barrels of them with hundreds of devices in them. And we would talk to the sales associates and say, how are they selling? And they'd say, well, look at the barrels. So there we are selling them by the barrel. And, we would look at the shelves to say, can we see, do we think that we could envision a place for Sideclick here? Are there any other accessories that are in our space? And there really wasn't. And so that's another way that we kind of got excited, is that, the closest thing to accessories for the streaming devices would basically be like Hulu or Netflix subscription cards that would be hanging on the shelf. And so it was, we could see that there could potentially be a place for us in these big box stores. And so, that was kind of how we tested the waters to see if we thought that we would fit in there.
Yeah, I like how you actually went into the store and tried to envision, could this be a product that a store like this would carry, or the kind of customers that are shopping at these stores, could they buy a product like this? Now, Brett, you mentioned that you have this journal that you write in where you have lots of product ideas that you jot down. What made you decide that this was the one that you would pursue? This was the one that you would 3D print and create a very early prototype to show around?
I think this one was most relevant to a rising market. It was also something that a lot of my ideas I thought would be fun, but there was no urgency to them. They weren't really solving big problems. So when this one came out, I realized that this one kind of had a better purpose. This one was something I wanted for myself. So I realized I wanted to make one to see if I could kind of pull it off just as a prototype. And if I could pull it off, I mean, I'm a pretty normal techie user. We just thought that other people would want it. So it was one of those ones where I think, like Jenn mentioned earlier, we just didn't see any other competitive products. And I used to, back to what Jenn was saying about Best Buy, I used to actually work at Best Buy through college. And they were always kind of pushing accessories. So Best Buy was always kind of like that was like our holy grail of retail, because I knew they'd want to push accessories toward this product, toward a growing market that there weren't really any accessories for. They used to push like HDMI cables, but pretty much everyone has HDMI cables now. So I wanted this. I knew that if I saw it on the market, I'd buy it. So I kind of just had to jump on it before someone else did. That's always the drive for everything in my journal, is like, it doesn't have to be now, but if somebody else does it before me, I'm going to be really upset. So this one was the one that I just didn't want to wait any longer.
Makes sense. Now, you mentioned that these big box retailers like Best Buy push accessories, and the fact that this was a product that I guess worked alongside an accessory, or it could be considered an accessory itself. What made you? What's I guess attractive about being in business with selling a product like this, like an accessory?
Well, I'm not sure if it is that. I mean, I was always a little worried with having a product that had a niche market. I was always worried that we were limiting the type of people we could sell to. But I think what we found is that the niche market is really big and growing. So it made marketing a little easier to focus. I think
I think too, kind of what I was thinking that comes to mind too is that, like, I think we sort of, even as we would go further down the road and developing the product, we sort of realized that what we thought was niche was growing larger and larger. And kind of what I mean by that is, at first we thought like we were sort of targeting, and we kept hearing the word cord cutting, right? Like, and we didn't know how many people were really going to be adopting that sort of cord cutting lifestyle. And what we came to find out is that even if you aren't a cord cutter and you still subscribe to cable, many millions of people who still have cable, and let's say they have a smart TV where they can still access their apps through their smart TV, still are going out and choosing to buy one of these streaming devices just because, either if it's for, a separate TV. And many people have more than one in their house. So it just sort of seemed like it was the demand for these actual streaming devices was just growing and growing and growing. And so there's just the excitement to see that, you could be an accessory for something and really solve a problem, like it's really not something that is, obviously it's a luxury of some sort. You couldn't just reach over and get another remote. But when we have two small kids, for instance, and, having this product on our streaming remote, the Sideclick, really, truly makes the TV watching experience easier for us as parents. It makes it easier for them. So it was very exciting just to think that we had a product that was, attached to something that was so big, but was truly something that was a problem solver. I think that's kind of what kept us, going, and we felt like kind of we were snowballing in a good direction.
Makes sense. So I think one of you mentioned that by focusing on a niche, even though that it was a very fast-growing niche, makes the marketing a lot easier. Can you say more about this?
Yeah, I think. Well, I think it really started with our first Kickstarter campaign. We launched Kickstarter. We took a long time to get ready to launch Kickstarter. I think I started developing the product in it was either January or February of 2015. We launched our Kickstarter campaign in April, and what we did is we launched and then thought we'd tackle the initial, and now I'm talking about marketing more and getting the word out for our Kickstarter campaign. Immediately we started targeting like all of the media who were writing about cord cutting and who were reviewing these devices. So we started looking for all of the media contacts that we could find, and we spent, out of a 30 or 40 day campaign that we had, I mean, we spent every single day of it for several hours finding new contacts, writing
writers,
about our writers, bloggers, whoever it was, and targeting those people and telling them about our product. So that was the start of our marketing campaign.
Gotcha. So you're able to identify what these people identify themselves as and look for people that were writing towards that audience to reach out to?
That's right. That's exactly right. So there was a lot of momentum and in blogs and in big publications like CNET and TechCrunch. Everyone was writing and reviewing these streaming devices and talking about. So there was sort of like the reviewers who were reviewing the gadgets themselves, who would be interested in it in more of like a hardware aspect of how it was working with the streaming device. There was also a segment of the media that was just discussing sort of the cord cutting movement, who could also be interested in our product because we, are showing how there's more, commerce coming, that's sprouting from this cord cutting movement. And then there was, a third sort of population of writers that are just kind of interested in, Kickstarter projects and what's new there. So we sort of built this really robust list just from searching people and what they were covering. And so if we've sort of learned that if they're already talking about something in the industry, they're much more likely to talk about your product. And, these kind of what I've learned too is, these writers and these bloggers, they're looking for content to, write about, obviously. And so if you can make a connection with them by saying, hey, I really enjoyed your review of the Roku 2, and let me show you how our product attaches to it. And, so it was kind of easy to grab their attention by knowing that we were already in their wheelhouse.
So you mentioned these three pretty distinct groups of people. You have the tech kind of hardware reviewers. You have people that are just talking in general about cord cutting, and then you have the people that are covering Kickstarter that you reached out to help promote your Kickstarter campaign. Now, out of these three, can you talk a little bit about maybe the benefits or the advantages of focusing on one of the three? I guess what are the kind of pros, not necessarily the cons, but what are the pros of focusing on reviewers versus people just talking generally about the space versus people talking about Kickstarter? Did you notice any differences in I guess the results of working with them?
This would probably be a good opportunity to talk. So for, we sort of were looking at, the analytics that we could see that were coming in from who was referring the most people to our Kickstarter campaign. And two of the referrers who were referring a lot of traffic to us were these little niche websites. One was called Cord Cutters News, and the other was called aftvnews.com. And so these are just two separate bloggers, basically, that have turned their website into an entire space for cord cutting information. So Cord Cutters News is our friend Luke Boma, who we've become friendly with, and he is just, his life is cord cutting. He has made himself the know all in this industry. And so, by him reporting on us, we've sort of, connected and formed a great partnership, because he keeps us up to date in cord cutting, news and everything affecting our industry. And then, his audience of cord cutters was a great testing ground for us. And, we got a lot of Kickstarter backers that maybe normally would not have known about us, but they did specifically, just because they were interested in the content that he was providing. And the same kind of goes for the other website, which was called AFTV News. It was a website kind of solely dedicated to Amazon Fire TV enthusiasts. So, just by kind of really taking the time to connect with those content providers and, talking with them and kind of taking the opportunity to get to know who their viewer is and the types of things that they wanted, I think we were able to gain a lot of insight into the type of customer that could potentially be a Sideclick customer.
Makes sense.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So before we get into the Kickstarter stuff, I want to talk a little bit about the early prototype. So, Brett, you mentioned that you created this prototype using a 3D printer, and I think this is a very it's a very useful avenue for a lot of people that want to create a hardware product, that want to prototype a product that doesn't exist yet, but doesn't have a lot of the funds to go through a manufacturer, or maybe just want something very early on. Talk to us about this process. What kind of 3D printer are you using? What kind of software are you using? How do you even begin going down the route of creating a prototype with a 3D printer?
Well, so I've been through this through my work, through my day job. I've been through this in the past. However, most of the products I did were prior to available 3D printers or general use 3D printers. They were all commercial, larger $10,000 machines. So I used to pay more for a single prototyped part than I did for my entire 3D printer. My 3D printer is a printer bot. It's called a Simple Metal. It actually was a Kickstarter campaign. However, I purchased it after the company had launched after the Kickstarter campaign. So I basically I designed all the parts myself, just using 3D modeling software. I printed them on I did a lot of trial prints, because all of the remote controls that I attached to have very unique shapes. Some that are harder to grab than other ones. Very rounded, glossy surfaces are hard to get a good snap onto. So I did a lot of trial runs where I just printed out, maybe like the border and tried to slide it over and kept tweaking it until I had a pretty good fit. And then I'd work my models a little more. And I was just printing shells at the time, clips and shells of remotes. At the same time, I had started to buy a plethora of remote controls off of eBay and Amazon to use as research. I kind of knew that I wanted one of the style universal remotes where you just point them head to head and they teach each other, instead of the kind where you had to pull out a code list with all the manufacturers and 1,000 codes for different models. So at the same time I'm doing these prints on the shells, I'm looking for off-the-shelf kind of remote controls that are available that are already kind of small in form. I had the mechanical and the design background, but I did not have the electrical background. So the whole time, and I think when I got one that I thought was pretty good, I actually printed a prototype that looked kind of large and bulky, but I took the guts out of a remote control and kind of put them inside. So I had a working prototype that I used just to kind of play around with and see how it worked and see how I liked it. So through that, I kind of just kept on refining the process and ended up with, and I know we were about to get into the Kickstarter campaign, but it's kind of interesting when we talk about that. I came up with a whole line of prototypes, and then after our first Kickstarter campaign, we ended up kind of completely changing the design, which I could talk about later. So through this, I think that the 3D printer was relatively new to me at the time as well. I didn't buy it for this project. I had bought it just prior to kind of tinker with. So I was still kind of learning the machines, the ins and outs of the machine, using the standard software that comes with it. I can't remember. I think it's Slicer is one of them, and it's all kind of freeware that you use to drive these. And I printed. I still can't let them go. I have boxes and boxes of prototypes just because they have some sort of like sentimental value to me.
Yeah, some kind of evolution of your product development. I think I would keep them too if I was you.
Yeah, exactly.
So you had these prototypes made. Now, how much did you have, I guess, ready by the time that you guys decided to launch that very first Kickstarter? Did you already have a working prototype?
I had a working prototype that was not visually appealing. And then I had, for the first campaign, I had 4 prototypes that I had basically made that were shells. They had no guts. And I had printed them. And because I'm better at working with my hands than I am with Photoshop, at least back then, I actually spent time using like Bondo, like, they use for body filler for cars. And I was wet sanding them and spraying them. And I ended up with, if you look in the first Kickstarter campaign, those are all just kind of hand built prototypes that have a skeleton of a 3D printed part. And then I had one that we didn't even show in the campaign that was a working prototype.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So we've been talking about the first campaign. When we say the first campaign, what happened was that you guys launched 2 campaigns for the same product, right? The first one had a goal of $150,000. And talk to us about what happened. Like what happened between I guess the first campaign and then the second campaign, which I think launched very quickly after.
Yeah. So the first campaign, which we did launch in April, I had 4 models, and we had a model for the Roku at the time, the Amazon Fire TV player, the Amazon Fire TV stick, and the Apple Generation 3, which is the little silver slim metal remote that Apple used to make. And I had a dedicated remote control and design for each of those units. We had asked for $150,000. Because of what I told you earlier, we kind of started doing our marketing day 1 of the campaign, and it lasted throughout. We kind of had a slow increase of backers. It didn't start off very quick. It kind of rolled in. We were picked up by Uncrate, which is, which ended up being one of our largest funding days of our campaign. I think they were one of our bigger. We had CNET articles, Gizmodo, Engadget, all of they were great and very successful. But Uncrate, I think, was our biggest one. I think they have some loyal backers. Regardless of all of the media that we got, we still never reached our goal of $150,000. However, I see that in the long run as a blessing, because during our campaign, Roku launched a line of remotes, a line of devices, a brand new line of devices, and introduced 2 new remote controls. So now I'm thinking...
did Apple TV.
Oh, I'm sorry. So did the Apple TV. I'm not sure if they had launched yet, but they had announced that they were going to launch a new one. So meanwhile, my cost predictions for all of my tooling and my plastic parts now just almost doubled. And we already didn't hit our goal of our first one. So I kind of went back to the drawing board, and I started thinking about how I could reduce the cost of my tooling and make a more simple design. So what I came up with was a remote control portion. Our universal remote control portion is really just it's a column of 8 buttons, and it's a slim remote control that you can use just by holding it in your hand. It doesn't need to be attached to the streaming. It has its own batteries, its own power, everything. And then what I came up with, which is really unique to our system, is an interchangeable clip system. So every one of our remotes now, every one of our models uses the same master remote, or the same design of remote, and you could slide off a clip and then replace it with another clip. So now I just cut my tooling costs down significantly, and we also kind of lined ourselves up to turn around new models quicker because there's less development that's necessary. So
definitely see the blessing and the curse with that, because now you had the opportunity to not only create a model that works for these new models of remotes that are coming out, but then of course create something much more universal for application for future applications of this technology.
And the blessing and the blessing was just because I felt like if we did get funded that first time, I would have felt obligated to deliver the product that I originally had proposed, and it would have ended up costing us a lot more.
Gotcha. So now what happens when you don't reach your, well, we'll kind of talk about it. So you had to go $150,000, still raise a ton of money, I guess on paper for $109,000. What happens when you don't reach your Kickstarter funding goal? Does like nothing happen?
Nothing happens. Backers get their money back. It just everything stops. Backers get their money back.
Well, they're never charged is actually how it works. They don't get charged until it's funded.
Gotcha. So then what did you guys do? Because you relaunched the campaign pretty much immediately after that first Kickstarter ended. Is that correct?
It felt like a lifetime because it was it was 3 months, but meanwhile we had just kind of put ourselves out there. So and every day.
And just, I was going to say, like, Brett was immediately kind of, excited and we sort of knew we had a better idea. So we were working really hard to kind of redo our campaign in order to launch. But the really nice thing that we experienced from the first campaign, especially when we failed, is that we had a very vocal, loud, cheering section of backers that were really disappointed that we failed. They because they wanted the product. So we sort of constantly kept communicating with these backers, and we felt very confident that if we were to relaunch and we could get our costs down, that we felt confident that we could close to match the enthusiasm of that we received, which was, we did a good job. We had, over 2,000, backers and over $100,000. So we knew that we could count on the support of many of those backers the first time, that they would kind of continue with us to the second campaign, which did in fact happen. So that was kind of, a great way to sort of, they were excited, they wanted the product, and they kept with us while we sort of figured out, our developmental stuff.
Yeah, so the second campaign that was launched basically raised the exact same amount of money, but this time you set a lower goal of $80,000, ended up raising pretty much $109,000, almost exactly the same amount that you raised last time from another 2,651 backers this time. So was it much easier to raise this or hit this goal the second time around? Like, were you able to contact the people that funded you or attempted to fund you in that first campaign?
Yeah, we recontacted everyone, and it was easier for us because we had already established those contacts. However,
I think we made like 60,000. Yeah, but I think but we did lose some momentum. However, when we first launched the second campaign, I think we made like $60,000 in a day and a half. Like, it was immediately the people who were there the first time who were excited, they immediately jumped back in. So it was like it really helped to kind of feed our excitement, because we were literally just watching the numbers climb and just feeling excited. Like, okay, they're with us. Like, we're gonna make it this time. And, of course, you had to kind of go out. Not everybody would recommit. Some people don't even realize that the first product campaign failed. So, you still have to go through the work of going after the press. And we still did all of that work to remind people that, okay, our first campaign failed, but here we are again with the second one. And it's harder. You have it's a more steep hill to climb, especially when you're pitching the media, because if they covered you for the first campaign and you failed, they're probably not going to cover you for the second one unless you've shown something that's, really newsworthy and something that's changed quite a bit from the first one. So luckily, I think, so just going to say that it was really just luckily we had really enthusiastic backers, and that kind of helped us get funded, I think, the second time around.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what did you guys do when you needed to hit the press again? Because obviously you still had a lot of support from the people that were already backing you the first time, but now you still, of course, like you're saying, you still have to hit the PR process to get that kind of coverage. Were you approaching the same people, same bloggers, same reviewers again this time around, or did you try to go after others that didn't cover you the first time?
we were constantly building our list. Like I used to joke with Brett that, if all else fails, we've built a really robust media list that we could probably sell and have that be a revenue stream, because we really were constantly building this list of, bloggers and their Twitter handles and everything. So we had a really robust list. So, we really did just, we had a pretty great, success rate in having people write about us and things like that. But even that success rate was a small percentage of our overall list that we had built. So we just kept, kept emailing, kept tweeting. And, we did have some people that maybe saw us and moved on, and then they did cover us the second time around. We weren't as successful the second time around in getting as many of the media pitches that we did the first time, but we still did get new ones. And it was just, it's a numbers game, really. If you send so many emails, you're going to have a success rate, but it does take quite a bit of effort to keep, trying to get in their forefront.
Mm-hmm. So now after you hit the goal this time and you raised the over $100,000, what was the next step? What did you need to use the money for?
Well, that money was pretty much all used for tooling and for development. So I had a contact locally who helped me develop the PCB board for our design and helped me get those prototyped. So I was paying him on a contract rate and funding all of the prototypes for that. Then I started working with a manufacturer and making some molds. They started off making prototypes, and that process went really slow to start off with. I think until you build up like a reputation with your manufacturer, they kind of take you as lower priority. Mm-hmm. So getting the initial prototypes made took a little while, and we started slowly making new molds, and it was a back and forth process. We're making our parts in China, which is relatively easy, especially since I have a day job and I get to communicate with China at nighttime. But the flow of information back and forth, and even the flow of parts, was actually much smoother than I had anticipated. Mm. So we worked for a while, improving the fits and the snaps and everything. And that was a pretty long process doing that. So between the tooling and the development of the product, I'm trying to think. I think we used up almost all of the Kickstarter funding between those, and I can't remember if it paid for the first round of parts, but we definitely needed more funding after that. That was not nearly enough to get going. I think we made
another $20,000 in pre-orders after that. But even that was, we were needing more money at that point.
Wow. So you mentioned, I think in a pre-interview, about how one of the things that you really figured out how to do was to leverage the support of your Kickstarter backers after the campaign ends to drive reviews and help build momentum and excitement about the product. Now, I think we talked about this between the first campaign and the second campaign, how you were able to keep that momentum going as much as you could. What did you do after the campaign ended the second time to successfully fund the campaign? How did you keep the momentum going and people excited to essentially stick around for the actual, finished version of the product that could be, bought on your site? How did you guys keep the momentum going?
I'm not sure if we really did much. We made sure that we kept in good standing. I spent too much time on Kickstarter, especially watching the campaigns that go up in flames because they either stop communicating with their backers or they're 2 years late on their campaigns. So we really wanted to make sure that we stayed in good standing with our backers, both good and bad updates. So we made sure, I think Jenn was really the one who kept us on track there, making sure that we had an update at least monthly, if not more, to our backers.
Luckily, I think I really was pleasantly surprised in the type of customer or the type of backer that backs projects on Kickstarter Kickstarters, I found that, overall, the majority of backers really understand the spirit of Kickstarter. They understand that it's rare that products meet their production schedule, even though, everyone goes in with the best of intentions. There is, a small but vocal group that doesn't really understand the spirit of Kickstarter, and they just understand that they paid for a product and it's been, 60 days since it was supposed to be delivered, and they're, angry. But for the most part, I found it to be a very positive, nurturing group of people that really want you to succeed. And so that was, kind of, that gave us it gave me personally just a lot of, excitement, because I used to dread having to give, updates where we'd say that we were, behind again for 4 weeks, or, however it was. But for the most part, people really did understand, and they wanted you to take the time necessary to, perfect the product. And when we did deliver a product, everybody was really satisfied and super happy. We got so many comments saying that, they were so glad we took our time. And we were, I think, how many months did we end up behind, Brett? It was like
I think it was about
maybe?
5,
Was
4 or 5 months behind.
Yeah. And so, at the end of the day, it's I think it's on average, I think it's like 85% of projects are at least that late on Kickstarter. Every creator goes in with sort of like a naive optimism that they can do it, and then you run into all of these roadblocks. But I think because we had really good communication with our backers, and we ended up delivering a really great product, they were excited for us and excited to be in at the ground floor. And, we tried to do little things for them here and there. Like, for instance, on our packaging, our first round of packaging on the back in big letters, it was like, this was brought to you through the support of 2,600 backers on Kickstarter. Thank you, backers. We always tried to kind of make them feel that we will always remember our roots of how they made it happen for us. And also, too, we sort of tried to give, we decided internally that, because, for instance, the Apple TV product came out with a new device, and we had backers that kind of wanted to be able to have a version for their new upgraded Apple IV product that they had when they pledged, and we costed everything just solely based on the Apple III model. So we kind of made a decision internally, which I think was a really great decision that we made, that we decided that we were going to offer all of our backers a free adapter clip for the new Apple TV 4 once we had that developed. And they would just have to pay, a small shipping fee for that. But that way, that would, because it's a modular design now, it allows them to upgrade their Sideclick to their new Apple IV. And so, it did cost us some money to do that. However, by making a large group of people happy, when we sort of announced that product, or when we announced that offer to them, was the same time that we asked them to help us with our reviews on Best Buy, because we had just started our relationship with bestbuy.com. And we had a really big response from our Kickstarter backers. Like, many of them, went ahead and filled out the paperwork and got their free adapter clip. And many of them went to Best Buy and reviewed our products. And we had a really good, our merchant team over at Best Buy was really excited at the reviews that were coming in. And so that was kind of like a really great leveraging of our supporters from the beginning, and they were helping us grow.
Yeah, so you're essentially giving out like free samples to your most dedicated customers, and they paid you guys back. It sounds like much more than you would have even wanted by writing all these reviews for you, which then helps bolster your relationship with Best Buy, and then of course drives more people to purchase.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So I didn't realize that you guys were working with Best Buy, the website. Are you also in the retail store, or was this deal specifically for the .com?
We're actually we're in the stores as of about 2 weeks ago.
Nice. So how did that get I guess arranged? How did you have to work with a buyer to get into a place like Best Buy?
we went to, I was somewhat reluctant, and Jenn kind of talked us into going to the Consumer Electronics Show, which was it's in January every year, in Vegas. We went in January of 2016. There's like four different venues, or 4 or 5 different venues out there. And one of them they call Eureka Park, which is for startups. I think you have to meet a certain criteria in order to display there, and they have lower costs for renting the booth, and give you some additional perks. So we set up a booth there and went out not really knowing what to expect, and through those 4 or 5 grueling days of standing on our feet and talking to hundreds of people a day, we met contacts for all of the major retailers, a bunch of smaller websites, talked to a lot of individuals who were just interested, talked to some media. But one of the people who came to visit us was a sales rep who's out in Minnesota who reps for both Target and Best Buy, and started our relationship from that point on. And it took a while. I mean, we just got in the stores. I think we were up on BestBuy.com probably in
July.
So even to get to that point took almost 6 months.
Yeah. So we sort of started slowly with them. It was kind of like, we started as soon as we had order, because when we first went to the Consumer Electronics Store, we didn't even have any product yet. We were still, even we were at that point, we even had like a big PCB problem, and we were having to kind of start over with our electronics components sourcing. And so things were not, cemented, and we didn't have orders that we could, make on the spot, which was kind of like everyone in that Eureka Park section. But, as soon as we got our products in, we sort of started with bestbuy.com, and we were told that, we needed to kind of meet a certain metric of sales per week on their .com before they would entertain, placing us in the store. And so it was constantly sort of meeting little milestones with them. And then once we met those milestones, it was then the conversations of being put into the store happened. And it's just working with a big box retailer as well is like, it's learning a new language. There's so many requirements, and if you're not from the retail industry or space, I really do describe it as you kind of have to learn to speak a whole new language. There's just different criteria and different steps that you have to go through to get involved with a big box store like Best Buy. So and all of those things are very they take a lot of time. So we got really lucky because we met a really great team of sales reps that their specialty is they have the relationships already. So I feel really good that they're sort of our face-to-face. They're located where, the merchant team is located, and they're sort of helping us navigate the process. But at the end of the day, it takes a long time.
So can you maybe go into some details about some of these steps or milestones that might trip other entrepreneurs up, or something to look out for if you are working with a big box retailer? What are some things that were maybe challenges that were more difficult than others to get through?
Well, I think one of the things, and Brett, you can kind of speak to it from maybe your more technical side too. But for me, I think what entrepreneurs need to know when they work with with big box stores is that you need to expect to spend a lot of money with them before you're going to start seeing any money back. And kind of what I mean by that is, it starts with things like insurance requirements. Their insurance requirements caused us to need to up our insurance. So that's several more $1,000s that we need to spend in insurance to be a vendor with them. Also, there's something called like data pool synchronization, where you are inputting your SKUs and all of your product information that you have from like your GS1 into something called a data pool. And they subscribe to the data pool, and it's just how the information is exchanged from the vendor to the store. And you also have to pay for a subscription to the data pool, which is also several $1,000s. Then there is a EDI, which is how they submit purchase orders back and forth, and accounts receivables and accounts payables information. That is a subscription service that you have to pay for. Also, which is quite interesting and frustrating, is that in order to see your daily sales reporting, you have to pay and subscribe to a metrics and reporting report.
Wow.
So there is a lot of costs associated, and so it's risky, because if your product
you have to pay for all this
well,
before you ever see a dime. That's the hardest part.
Did you have anybody that was helping you out along this process, or were you just working directly with Best Buy, and then every week you're like, wow, this is another bill we have to pay? Did anyone kind of eventually come along and show you the way?
Our sales reps did a really good job of pushing us along, because I have to say, if we didn't have the sales reps that constantly were sort of like, listen, this is the sky's the limit. We're going to do well. This is, they kind of needed to push us along, but even with them pushing us along and their expertise in dealing with other customers, it's a lot of, you really, at the end of the day, you're the one that's figuring out the data pool, when I've never had any experience with any sort of data information and things like that. So you really are learning a new language, and you just there's many days where I felt like all I did all day was pay money to Best Buy or go through some step that I just wasn't confident that I knew what I was doing. But now that I've gotten past that, and we're starting to see like our receivables grow, it definitely feels worth it. But really, that could be a big barrier for a company, not knowing how labor intensive it is to work with a big retailer and how expensive it is, because, we have 90-day payment terms. So all of that was, all of that money that we were having to pay for the services like that I described, that was months ago, before we even had we were months away from getting our first purchase order. And then once we get a purchase order, it's 90 days. So it's quite a lot of cash up front.
So lots of long-term projects for you guys, it seems, with this working at Best Buy and then the 2 Kickstarter campaigns that you had to launch. Now, one thing you mentioned in the pre-interview was about how you guys have both learned how to properly build a project schedule and timeline these days. So tell us a bit more about this. Like, how do you even begin to approach a large project these days?
I think I've only learned by making mistakes originally. I think I could help someone build a better project schedule, but I missed the mark a lot. I think you forget about certain things like ocean freight from China, depending on where your warehouse is, can be anywhere from 3 weeks to 5 weeks. That I just completely kind of left off our schedule. The back and forth of making, every time I thought we could make iterations on our design and our molds relatively quickly. However, they have to put the machine, the machine that they modify or machine the parts to is a completely different machine than what shoots the plastic parts, the injection molding machine. So they have to take that off and then get it in queue to do machining and then put it back on. And every time you do that, you're getting charged, and it's another week. And we went back and forth because I being somewhat of a perfectionist, I wanted the snaps to be perfect, and I wanted everything to be perfect. And at a certain point, I think we just made the decision saying, everyone's going to be happy that they got this product. We could continue to improve things, but we're at a point where we're ready to launch, and we have to. We can't waste any more time.
I was watching Shark Tank, and Mark Cuban once said that perfection is the death of profitability. And so I would have to remind Brett of that, sometimes, that yes, we want to deliver a great product, but we can't do it, at the sake of our company's ultimate success.
That makes sense. Can you say a little more about this? I think there's a state that a lot of entrepreneurs get caught up in, where they want to make the product they're working on perfect before they launch, or make the site perfect before they launch, or make the Kickstarter campaign page perfect before they decide to launch it. How do you recognize when it's good enough, I guess, to go live?
I think you have to do proper testing. You have to make sure that it holds up to the claims. I mean, as far as this goes, we actually something I didn't even breach yet. I ended up, one of the reasons we had our major delay in our product being delivered is I had a PCB made, the one that I had designed locally, that was unreliable, and we had problems. And I didn't even know that until we had made almost 3,000 of them. So I got this news, I got samples and had issues. I think I had gone to China for the first time to meet with our plastic supplier, our electronic supplier. I tested some out, approved them. We had like 3,000 made, and I got samples right before we went to the CES show in January, and none of them worked properly.
Wow.
So
it was very stressful.
That was something. So that was, yeah, exactly. That was an example of something that was inexcusable. I mean,
obviously you cannot move forward with a product that doesn't work.
That would have put us out of business. Having 50% of the people who get our product have trouble programming the remote would have been devastating, right? But maybe we're compatible with, at this point, I believe it's 9 different streaming device remotes. Having one clip that fit a little looser than the other 8 is something that I just had to deal with. We had already done 2 revisions on it. Every revision was costing me 2 to 3 weeks. And it was good. It just wasn't perfect. So you really had to weigh out the consequence. A loose clip might get us, maybe 1 or 2 lower reviews, where a bad electronics board would have crippled us. So, we had a really good manufacturer. They worked out a lot of the problems internally. They worked out any flaws in the design. They helped tweak stuff to make it better, more manufacturable. And we got to a point pretty quickly where we were very happy with the product. Something that I would be proud to put our name on, and also something that we've had, and I've talked to some friends who have the same thing, who have had some of the original models that have been out for like 2 years now, and they still, same set of batteries, and they've always been attached to the remote, and it's been 2 years and they have no problems with them. I guess it's been about a year and a half maybe. So it's really just use and proper testing and
I think that we sort of complement each other too, because Brett is more of a perfectionist and I tend to want to like push a little bit. So I think that we kind of complement each other, and I can kind of remind him that this is an area that we can perfect as we go down the line, but we can't afford any more holdups. So we constantly sort of weigh the pros and the cons with adding more time versus, tweaking a product. But I think we have sort of learned that sometimes you just have to go, or someone else will.
Yeah, I think that work with a co-founder that can balance you out is very important. The last thing you want is 2 perfectionists or 2 people that are ready to ship things right away, both working on the same team, because you don't have that kind of balance. I think that definitely works well for the both of you. So, thank you so much for your time, Jenn and Brett. So sideclickremotes.com, again, is the website, that is the store. Anywhere else you recommend listeners check out if they want to follow along with any new products that you guys are coming out with?
Yeah, we always launch them on our website first, and that's, like you said, sideclickremotes.com. We try to get everything up on Amazon as quickly as possible. We're releasing a new model right now for a new streaming device called the Mi Box, and we're going to get that up on Amazon soon. We're already selling them on our website. So Jenn does a really good job at keeping our backers up to date. So
yeah, and we're also on Twitter and Facebook, so you can find us at Sideclick Remote.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll link all that in the show notes. Again, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for having us, Felix. Nice talking to you.
Here's a sneak peek of what's in store for the next Shopify Masters episode.
Creating affiliates through people that have organizations and have followings online, it makes things a lot easier instead of actually having tangible people on the ground trying to move your product around their gym or whatever it may be.
Thanks for listening to Shopify Masters, the e-commerce marketing podcast for ambitious entrepreneurs. To start your store today, visit shopify.com/masters to claim your extended 30-day free trial.